Hey, what's going on guys? Tanmay here. Welcome back to my channel, and in today's video we're going to talk about the most important factors that you guys need to know as a beginner when you're about to buy your very first interchangeable lens camera. Let's get started. Now before you start off, those who are new on this channel, my name is Tanmay Sakpal. I love consumer tech, especially photo and video gadgets like cameras, microphones, tripods, gimbals, action cams, drones, etc. You guys can check out this channel. You'll find quite a lot of reviews and my personal user experience about these gadgets. And not so recently, I got my very first APS-C mirrorless camera, the Sony a6700. I've made my very first user experience video, 1 year old user experience video about this camera. I'll drop the link somewhere around here or here. You'll see the floating card. You guys can check it out. But in this video, we're going to talk about something even more important for you as an audience, especially for those who are interested in photography and videography and are looking to buy their very first serious camera. When I talk about serious, it means a camera which has an interchangeable lens facility, meaning that you have a camera and then you have a lens that attaches to the camera body, and then you can change the different lenses to get the different look and the work that you're particularly doing for, right? So that is a basic definition of interchangeable lens cameras. These cameras come in all different flavors and shapes and sizes, and we're going to talk about all of that in this video. More importantly, before we start off, a very key important factor to keep in mind is, as a beginner, as an amateur, when you buy a interchangeable lens camera, a very serious camera, because let's say you want to get into the hobby of photography and videography, most of us, that is most audience that is watching this video, we're not going to keep on upgrading our mirrorless camera or our interchangeable lens camera every 1 or 2 years, right? When you buy your first camera, it's very likely that you're going to use it at least for the next 5 years or maybe even more, because these cameras are built to last, and since they have interchangeable lenses, when you put on new lens, it just breathes new life into these cameras. So keep that in mind, because these cameras, these gadgets, this consumer tech is not like your smartphones or other gadgets which you can keep on refreshing and upgrading every 1 or 2 years, right? Many of us do upgrade smartphones on a very shorter duration, but when it comes to interchangeable lens cameras, it's highly unlikely that we will not be upgrading this camera in the next few years. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we've set up our initial prerequisite and now we are looking into our very first camera, let's now talk about the most important factors that affect our camera buying purchase decision and that all of you guys should keep in mind. So the number one factor that matters when you're buying your very first serious camera, let's just call it serious camera, because saying interchangeable lens camera will take quite a long time and I'm gonna make multiple mistakes. So I'm just gonna refer to this dedicated camera, which is the interchangeable lens camera, as a serious camera, okay? And this means that we're not talking about a smartphone, we're not talking about small pocket cams or action cams. We're talking about a camera with a dedicated body and a lens that attaches to that body, making it an interchangeable lens camera. So the very first important factor that you guys need to consider when you're making your purchase for the very first camera is, what is your purpose for this particular camera? What sort of content are you going to create? Now obviously the content that you're going to create using a dedicated camera is either going to be photography oriented or videography oriented, or maybe it will be a mix of two, making you more of a hybrid shooter, right? So 3 options: photography oriented, photography centric, videography centric, or it's a hybrid option. Now it's highly likely, as a beginner, as an amateur, we don't really know what exactly is our specialty or what exactly are we going to be interested in. We just want a camera that kind of does both the things, and then we will figure out what interests us, right? So maybe you're interested more in photography, maybe you just want to be a photographer first and video is not something that you consider very serious, or maybe let's say you are just gonna do pre-wedding shoots or wedding videography, or you want to become a cinematographer where you want to make movies and shoot video content, then you're a videography oriented guy first, right? Or you're someone like me who wants to dabble into both the things, and as a beginner, as someone who has used this camera, which right now I'm shooting the video on the a6700, it's a hybrid camera, and as someone who has used this camera for over 1 year, my recommendation for you as a beginner who's choosing the very first camera is to, try to be somewhere in the middle, not just look for a camera which does photography the best or just does videography the best. Try to figure out or try to get the camera that does both the things fairly good, because you never know, your interest may change, or you never know what interest you have right now as a beginner, right? And in today's time, in 2024, video content also plays very important role. So don't think that these cameras are just photocentric, they can shoot great video as well. So this was the very first factor, that is, what is your purpose? You need to figure it out, because depending upon whether you want to be a photographer first or whether you want to be a videographer first, these points will dictate what type of camera you want. Because these cameras have specific features as well. Some cameras are geared towards photography first, maybe they have high megapixels, or it has fast burst shooting modes, or maybe it is video centric, so it has higher frame rates and higher resolution video recording modes, maybe it has log profiles, etc. If you don't understand these jargons, just understand these cameras have specific features sometimes which cater towards photography first or videography first, or as I said, there is the third category, which is hybrid category, where they kind of do both things, not too good but decent enough. Okay, find your purpose, what you want to do, and then you can filter out the cameras that you want. So that's number one. Now let's talk about the second very important factor that plays a huge role in your camera selection, and that is the sensor size. Now these interchangeable lenses come in all shapes and sizes, all flavors, different style. You have rangefinder style, you have the conventional style, and more importantly, the sensor that is inside the camera plays an important role, because that affects many factors like the actual price of the camera as well as the lens selections. So these cameras, interchangeable lenses cameras, have sensors which have different physical sizes. Okay, so you have a micro four third camera, which is not exactly the micro four third, is not actually the size, it's just referred as to the sensor. I'll put an infographic which shows you the different sensor sizes, so that you can understand which sensor size is big, which sensor size is small. You'll get a relative idea about these sensor sizes. So starting from smartphones, we have tiny, very 1 over something sensors which are very tiny, that goes into the smartphones. Then you have the point and shoot cameras, which generally have 1-inch sensor. Then comes the micro four third. Then comes the APSC crop sensor cameras, which is the one this A6700 is. Then we have full frame, then we have medium format. So in the ascending order of the size, from smaller to larger. And of course there are some specialty size sensors also, but these are the most common ones. And from these, when you're talking about interchangeable lens cameras, 3 sensor sizes are the most famous ones. We have micro four thirds, which is the smallest out of the 3. Then we have APS-C, which is in the middle, and then we have full frame sensors. Okay, so it's highly likely that as a beginner who's picking up their very first interchangeable lens camera, you are gonna pick one of the 3. My personal recommendation would be to go with APS-C, but you can go either ways, and depending upon that, the price will vary as well as the lens selection will also differ. And you might have guessed it, smaller the size, more affordable the camera comparatively, and the larger the sensor size, the more expensive the camera. And of course, along with the price, obviously the camera performance also differs. It's not very significant when you're an actual beginner, it won't matter that much. But yeah, smaller the sensor, poorer the low light performance comparatively speaking, and larger the sensor, the low light capabilities are gonna be good. So if you are someone who is gonna shoot videos and photos mostly in low light environments, then maybe you need a full frame camera, right? That's how you judge and kind of filter out your options. Alright, so that is the second factor. Let's talk about the third important factor to consider when you are making your first purchase of this camera. So the third important factor that affects your camera buying decision is basically the brand and lens selection. So brand ecosystem and lens selection matters a lot. So when you talk about interchangeable lens cameras, we have basically a few major big brands which you can go ahead with, which are considered to be the market leaders. So we have Sony, we have Canon, we have Panasonic, we have Fujifilm, and we have Nikon. So these are the 5 general ones. There are other specialty cameras which do only photography or only videography, kind of like the Leica cameras, or we have Hasselblad and all those things. We're not gonna get into that. That is very like a niche line of cameras. We are talking about generic cameras, more specific towards amateurs and beginners who can get started and who want a good brand value as well, because brand value plays a very important role. That is because each of these camera manufacturers have their individual mounting system. What is a mounting system is basically the location where your lens attaches to the camera, right? So we have the camera body, we have the lens, and then the attachment point is basically called a mounting system, a mounting point. And Sony has their individual E mount system, Nikon has their Nikon Z mount, Z mount, Canon has their EF and RF mounts, then we have Fuji I think has their X mount, and then of course there are other mounts also. But the point that I'm making here is each of these individual mounts can only take certain lenses that are compatible with those mounts, right? So a Sony E mount will only take lens that is compatible with Sony E mount, and that lens which is compatible with Sony E mount will not directly connect to a Canon body, will not connect to a Canon camera or a Fujifilm camera or a Panasonic camera. So now you have to select a particular brand and ecosystem. So Sony played a very smart game many years ago. What they did is, with the E-mount system, that is the mounting point, they opened up this E-mount for other third-party lens camera manufacturers, okay? So Sigma and Tamron are basically primarily lens manufacturers. They don't make the camera body itself, but they make premium and good quality lenses. So what Sony said is they will open up their E-mount and enable other manufacturers like Tamron or Sigma to make lenses that attach to this E-mount. However, conversely, Canon restricted their RF mount and they said that only Canon can make lenses for that Canon mount. So basically a few years ago when the RF mount initially launched, only Canon was making lenses also, and that actually created a problem because there were not many options. Recently, Canon has opened up their RF mount to third-party manufacturers, so now we are starting to get more and more options. But this is something that you need to consider, right? So you need to figure out the lens options, as well as you also need to figure out the brand you're gonna stick with. So now that I have bought a Sony a6700 and I have two lenses, the lens currently that I'm shooting on is the 15mm 1.4 prime lens. It's an amazing lens. It's by Sony only, so it's a native lens. However, the second lens that I have is a Tamron all-in-one zoom lens. It's a big lens. You must have seen it on this channel, or maybe if you follow my other photography, videography centric channel where I make vlogs and photo video content first, Lens of Tanmay. On that channel, you might have seen that lens. So that's a Tamron lens with an E-mount system. So it attaches to this Sony a6700 perfectly, and it is compatible. So this is the whole lens ecosystem that I'm locked in now. So I cannot buy a Canon RF lens, or I cannot buy a Fujifilm X mount lens or Nikon Z mount lens, right? So this is something that you need to decide. And the more lens options you have, the better, because as a beginner you would want to have more lens options when you slowly get into the hobby of photography, videography, when you want to explore more, when you want to upgrade your lens. If you have the different options, you will also find some affordable options from third-party manufacturers, and because of competition, the lens prices kind of go down and you get a good premium lens at an affordable price. So that's the advantage of the brand as well as the ecosystem of lenses. Currently, when I'm recording this video in 2024, I suppose the Sony E-mount lens ecosystem is the largest. I think there are 500 plus E-mount lenses, obviously autofocus and manual focus included. And if you want to filter out and figure out the number of lenses currently available, there is a website, B&H Photo Video. On that you can go into the lenses section, you can filter out mirrorless or DSLR lenses. You can select the format, that is APSC or full frame, and then you can filter out how many lenses are available. You will get a count on the left hand side. So that will give you an understanding of how many lenses you have for that particular ecosystem. So let's say you are more inclined towards Canon camera, so you need to figure out how many RF lenses you have. If you are going to buy a Nikon camera, then you need to figure out how many Nikon Z mount lenses there are, right? So compatible lenses are also important. So this was the third important factor, that is the brand that you go along with and the lens ecosystem. And one last thing to remember is, obviously when you select a particular camera, it will have a particular sensor size. So you also need to figure out the lenses that particularly are natively compatible with that sensor size, meaning that some camera lenses are only suitable for APS-C size sensor, whereas some camera lenses are made for only full frame. And depending upon the camera body and the sensor size, you will have to select that appropriate lens. So you also need to filter that out and consider that and see which of the particular lenses are available. So if you want a APS-C camera, you also need to figure out, are there enough APS-C lenses or not, because many times camera manufacturers focus more on the full frame cameras and the lens options and kind of neglect the APS-C cameras. However, in today's time, the APS-C lenses are also kind of sufficient enough. You have many options as a beginner. So just keep that in mind. So this was the third factor, that is the brand as well as the lens selection and options. Let's move on to the next one. Now the fourth factor that you guys should consider when you're buying your first camera is something that is not very focused on and not very much talked about, and that is image stabilization, which is more specific towards the in-body image stabilization. So what do I mean by that? So basically IBIS, also known as in-body image stabilization, is a technology which basically makes the sensor shift itself to compensate for your jerky hand movements. So if you are holding the camera and shooting a photo or video handheld, and if your camera doesn't have IBIS, that is in-body image stabilization, and if you have shaky hands, you will see those vibrations and you will get shaky footage, and your video and your photo also might get blurred. Okay, and this is very important from a beginner's perspective, even though many of the beginner centric cameras don't have in-body image stabilization, which I personally feel manufacturers should offer, even if it is adding a little bit of cost, because as a beginner, you don't have very stable hands. So when you're shooting in low light and when you're reducing the shutter speed, it's highly likely that the photo that you click will be blurry if you don't have some form of stabilization. Now many of the lenses also have optical image stabilization inside them, but not all lenses have them, and it's a trend that I've seen over the years that these small mirrorless lenses are kind of ditching the optical image stabilization they have inside the lens. Okay, so if this point is confusing, the whole point of image stabilization, just to kind of simplify it, the camera body itself sometimes have in-body image stabilization as a feature, and the lens separately also sometimes have optical image stabilization. Now not all camera bodies have this image stabilization, in-body image stabilization, and not all camera lenses have optical image stabilization. You have to find and figure out which camera body has that, which lens has that. Okay, so personally I feel it is important. However, as I said, sometimes the lens comes with optical image stabilization, so that would be enough. Sometimes there is image stabilization inside the camera body itself, so even that is enough. You don't need to have stabilization in both lens and the body. So that was about IBIS, in-body image stabilization. So the next important factor is the video centric features. Now I know we already discussed that the video features will be dependent on what type of content you're gonna create. If you're a photographer first, maybe you don't care about this, you can actually skip this section. But in 2024, photo format is not just the content that is being created. A lot of video format, video content creation, short form videos, vertical videos, vlogs, and many video formats are also emphasized a lot. So it's important because when you buy a camera, as I said, we are going to use it for more than at least around 5 years. That is what I'm assuming. And you never know that video is going to be very, very important, even more important than it is today. So you want your camera to at least have 4K video recording, at least up to 30 FPS. Ideally 4K 60 FPS would be great. If your camera is 4K 120, then it's amazing, but it's highly unlikely that you'll get a budget camera which has 4K 120 FPS. But at least expect, or at least want 4K 30 FPS in your camera, so that it is a little bit future proof and you get good quality video as well. So that's about video features, and that's the basic, I would say, prerequisite that you should have for your very first camera, that it should be able to shoot 4K 30 FPS. 4K 60 would be great, because then you can slow down 50% of your footage to get a little bit of cinematic shots. Okay, so far we've talked about 5 important factors that go into buying your very first interchangeable lens camera. And if you've made it so far, and if you found value in this video, please guys, definitely subscribe on this channel, give it a thumbs up, put your questions and queries in the video description. I will try to answer them. In the previous video of A6700, one of the person mentioned that he would rather prefer Fujifilm because of the ease of use, and that brings me to the next point, which is the point number 6, which is ergonomics and ease of use of camera. Now this is a very, very important point. I kept it to the last because this is not something which is always taken very seriously, and this is also something that is not generally an option for beginner centric cameras, right? You can't choose the ease of use, you can't choose the ergonomics when you have very limited options, because when you have a price point in your mind, and it is very beginner centric, it's a very affordable centric camera, then it's highly likely that you'll have to go with what you get, right? You can't expect to have pro level ergonomics, pro level ease of use and extra features that will make your shooting experience better in that price point. But ergonomics and ease of use also play an important role, and my suggestion to you guys is, if you can actually go into camera stores and check out the different models, hold them in your hand, see how they feel in your hand, and try to take a few shots and videos if possible. If you have a demo camera in those camera stores, that would be really great because it will give you a basic understanding. Trust me guys, the menu systems of these interchangeable lens cameras are quite intimidating and quite daunting because they are definitely not like smartphones. Smartphones are like point and shoot, you just point and shoot the photo and you don't worry about the settings. When it comes to these interchangeable lens cameras, there are many jargons, many camera and photography centric jargons like ISO, exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, all these things. They come into picture and you can actually manipulate them individually, or you can obviously shoot in auto mode, but you are not gonna buy a pro level camera to just shoot in auto mode. So all these things come into picture, and menu systems are also brand specific. So Sony has their separate menu system, Fujifilm has their own menu system, Canon has its own menu system. Generally speaking, people consider Canon to be okayish to use. Fujifilm is considered to be more like a user-friendly interface to use, and it also has the film simulations and some editing features like filters in the photos and video features, which makes it a pleasant shooting experience. So maybe you don't want to do a lot of post-processing after shooting your photo or video, you just want to snap and get a good look, a good creative look inbuilt. So Fujifilm is a good camera in that sense, and thanks to that user who made that comment, and I told to him that I'll try to mention his comment. So do understand that ease of use, ergonomics, and these things are very subjective. So if possible, go to a camera store, take a feel of these cameras, hold it in your hands, try to shoot photos and videos, and then make that decision. Alright, so these were the 6 important factors, and if you've made it so far, I'm gonna add a bonus factor. I'm gonna add an important factor because you made it so far and you had the patience to go through this video. Thank you so much for watching till now. So the bonus to you guys is a category or a factor which is not exactly related to the camera itself, but something that you will absolutely need is the accessories that go around these interchangeable lens cameras. So when you buy your first interchangeable lens camera, it is not just the camera body and the lens, it is also the accessories that go around it. And some of the very basic accessories are tripods, camera bags and slings, filters, extra batteries, SD cards, microphones, quick release systems, and a whole bunch of small accessories, which makes the whole experience of photography and videography much more easier. I'm gonna make a separate video on these whole accessories because trust me guys, they are very important, even though they are not actually the camera and the lens, but they have a huge impact on your whole shooting experience. I've had a very good experience over the last 1 year with many of these accessories that I just mentioned. I just gave you an overview, but we'll talk in detail about these accessories and how they impact your shooting experience and make it easier. Okay, so keep that in mind because these accessories unfortunately are not very affordable. In fact, the whole camera and photography hobby ecosystem itself is not very affordable, to so to speak, because these are expensive gadgets. These are kind of a luxury kind of a hobby, right? So even if you're getting into photography, videography, it is quite expensive. Even though these gadgets are getting more and more affordable and there is something for every price point, it is still a expensive hobby. So understand that, and also understand that accessories also count a huge role. So if you have set a budget, it's not just about the camera body, because then there are lenses, and lenses are also very expensive. So apart from the lenses, we also have these accessories in mind. So keep a budget for that also, because trust me, as I said, these accessories are very important. And as I said, I'm gonna make a dedicated video on these camera accessories that have a huge impact on your photo and video shooting experience. Trust me on this. I've been using this camera for the last 1 year, and without these accessories, it would have been much more unpleasant experience. And as a beginner, you don't want these hurdles and these frictions, because then you lose interest in developing this hobby. Okay, so that's it for this video guys, but I'm still not done. And as a last bonus, if you go in the description of this video, I will also have some recommendations of cameras, with multiple options, not just my Sony. As a Sony fanboy, it's not like I'm just gonna recommend Sony. I'm gonna give you multiple options: Canon, Fujifilm, Panasonic, etc., and different formats, as well as 2 different budget points. So go check out the video description, check out the different options, check out these camera models, Google them, search them, do research them, and you have different price points as well. And while you do it, please give this video a like, as well as add a comment. That would be really helpful. I know this video was a little lengthy, but it's important because this is a big purchase decision that you're gonna make, so it's important that you're well informed. Alright, this is Tanmay Sakpal. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe and turn on the notifications for the upcoming video, especially the accessories one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.